I rode 300 miles to marry a woman I had never laid eyes on. And the worst part of it, the part I have never told straight to anybody until now, is that I would have looked you dead in the eye at the start of it and called myself the most sensible man in the territory. I was 41 years old that summer, and I had buried a wife. That is a thing a man learns to say flat, like reading off a brand, because if he lets it go soft in his mouth, it will take him down at the supper table in front of the hands. Sarah had been gone 3 winters. The 2-bar ran fine without her, better than fine. The herd was good, and the grass on the mesquite reach came back heavy after the wet spring, but a ranch house with 1 chair pulled out at the table is a particular kind of loud. I had got tired of the loud. So I did what a sensible man does. I sat down with a pencil one January night, and I figured the thing out like a tally. I did not want love. I had love, and love had cost me more than any cattle market ever did. What I wanted was a sensible woman, a town woman with manners and a level head, somebody who would keep a good house and not weep at me, and not make me feel anything sharp enough to lose. I wrote to a matrimonial agency back east the way another man might order a windmill out of a catalog, and I told them as much, in just about those words: steady, reasonable, no surprises. What came back after a season of letters was Miss Lavinia Prude of Calder, and Calder was the trouble, because Calder sat on the far side of the Calcine, 300 miles of the driest, meanest country God ever forgot to finish. The railroad came in there from the east. It did not come within 140 miles of Hollow Spring, on account of the Calcine being the kind of ground engineers take one look at and decide to lay track around. Miss Prude would come by rail to Calder. I would have to go fetch her across the dry. And you do not cross the Calcine in July on just any horses. You cross it on horses bred and broke for it, deep-chested, hard-footed, the kind that will go a day and a half without water and not lose their heads about it. There was exactly one outfit in 2 counties that raised that kind of horse, and that was the Notch, up under the Tallow Hills, an old man's place that everybody knew and nobody much went to. I rode up there on a Tuesday to hire the old man and a string of his horses to get me across to my wedding. The old man was dead. Had been near 2 years, it turned out, though news travels slow up against the Tallow Hills. What I found instead, in the breaking corral with a green 3-year-old on a long line, was the wrangler. "You'll be wanting horses," the wrangler said without turning around. The 3-year-old was a snorty bay, all elbows and opinions, and the wrangler was working it in a wide circle easy, talking low under the words to me the way you talk to a colt and a man at the same time. Folks only ride up the Notch Road for 2 reasons: bury somebody or buy horses. You don't look like a burying. "I'm looking to hire," I said, "horses and a hand to take me across the Calcine to Calder. I was told to ask for Wren." "You found Wren," and the wrangler turned around, and Wren was a woman. I have thought since about how a man's whole life can sit balanced on a stupid little hinge of a moment, and how that was one of mine, and how close I came to riding off in a fool's huff and never knowing it. Because that is near what I did. She was maybe 35, sun-cured brown, in a man's shirt and a man's hat and trousers gone pale at the knees, with a long black braid down her back and a face like the country, handsome and hard-used and giving nothing away. Cassandra Wren. Cass, the hands had called her, the few she kept, before there got to be only her. "You're a woman," I said, which is about the most useless sentence I have produced in my life, and I have produced some. "Has been remarked on," Cass Wren said. She coiled her line. The bay blew and dropped its head, and I will tell you, I had broke horses 30 years, and I had not gotten one to do for me what that one did for her with no more than the slack going out of a rope. You want to say something else foolish, or you want to talk about horses. I should have said the foolish thing and left. Lord knows I wanted to. I had 300 miles of desert in front of me and a strange bride at the end of it, and the last thing I wanted was a woman wrangler making me feel like a green hand on my own errand. But there were no other horses. The Calcine does not care what a man wants, so I swallowed it. Horses, I said. She named a price for the string and a price for herself, and the price for herself was high, and when I opened my mouth she said, "It's high because I'm the only one fool enough to go, and you're the only one fool enough to need to. I'll get you there alive. Cheaper men will get you there dead, and you won't be in a position to complain." She let that sit. Or you can wait for the stage road to thaw your nerve and arrive at your wedding a month late. Bride'll love that. I paid it. We shook on it, and her hand was dry and hard as a man's, and she squeezed once like she was testing whether mine would hold a rope, and let go. "We leave Thursday before light," she said. "You'll carry what I tell you and nothing else. And Marsh," she got my name off the agency telegram I'd shown her, "whatever you've got in your head about how this'll go, set it down before Thursday. The calcine doesn't honor a man's plans, just his water." I rode home thinking I had hired the most disagreeable person in the territory, and I was looking forward to delivering her 300 miles, collecting my reasonable bride, and never seeing the notch again. I have been wrong in my life. I have rarely been wronger. We left Thursday before light, like she said, with 6 horses, 2 under saddle, 4 on a string carrying water and grain and grub, and the stars still hard overhead. She set a pace that first morning that I thought was showing off, and I matched it stubborn and said nothing. And along about noon, when we'd done 30 mostly good miles and dropped down into the first arm of the calcine, I understood it had not been showing off at all. It had been mercy. Those 30 miles had grass and a creek. Everything after them did not. The calcine is a hard thing to make a person see who hasn't stood in it. It is not the rolling sand a man pictures. It is flats of cracked white hardpan that throw the sun back up at you so your face burns from below as well as above. It is washes choked with greasewood that cut your horse's legs. It is country so flat and so wide that the mountains you ride toward all day do not seem to come 1 foot nearer. Until you understand they are 40 miles off, and you have been fooling yourself about the distance the same way I had been fooling myself about a good many things. The silence out there is a weight. By the second day, I had stopped talking just to hear my own voice, because my own voice sounded small and stupid against all that quiet, and I did not care to keep being reminded. Cass Wren did not seem small against it. That was the first thing I marked, somewhere in that second day, watching her ride ahead of me with her hat low and her shoulders easy. The country did not crowd her. She had been raised in it. I came to learn, born at the notch, her mother dead young and her father teaching her the only thing he knew, which was horses and hard ground. She read the calcine like I read a tally book. She knew where the bad sand was before we hit it. She knew, by the slant of the light and the smell of the air, things I would have sworn no person could know. On the second night, camped dry in a wash with the horses picketed close, she caught me counting the water. "Quit it," she said. "You'll count it dry in your head and ride scared, and scared is what kills men out here. I've measured it. There's enough to 12-mile tank, and 12-mile has water this time of year. Trust the woman you paid to know. And if it doesn't—" She looked at me across the little fire, and for the first time something moved in that hard face that wasn't contempt for a soft cattleman. It was closer to tired. "Then I'll get you there on 5 horses, or 4, or I'll walk you out on my own 2 legs leading you by the hand because I shook on it. Now eat your bacon and go to sleep, Marsh. You snore like a sick bull, and I'd like to hear it tonight, because a man who snores is a man who isn't dying." I laughed. It surprised us both. It came out of me rusty, like a gate that hadn't swung in 3 winters, and her mouth did a small thing at one corner that wasn't quite a smile but was in the family of one. I rolled up in my blanket and I did snore, I expect. And in the morning the water was where she said it would be, at 12-mile tank, brown and warm and the sweetest thing I ever drank. That was the trip's whole rhythm those first days. She would say a hard, dry, true thing, and I would chew on it and find it was kind underneath, the way her hand had been hard on top and steady under. I had spent 3 years being handled gentle by people who were afraid I'd break, the hand stepping soft around Sarah's name, the church women in Hollow Spring bringing pies and pity. Cass Wren was not afraid I'd break. She acted like I was a sound horse who'd been spoiled by too much careful handling and needed working back into shape. And I found, to my considerable irritation, that it was exactly what I'd needed and nobody'd had the nerve to do. I told myself it didn't signify. I was a betrothed man riding to a sensible wedding. I had a picture in my head of Miss Lavinia Prude of Calder. I had 2 letters from her, written in a fine even hand, and a small photograph, and from the 3 of them I had built a whole woman the way I'd built the plan by tally. Calm, correct, lovely in the still, arranged way of the photograph. A woman who would never make me laugh rusty in a wash at midnight, and that, I had decided in January, was the entire point. I did not want to be made to feel things. Things had a cost. I held that picture up against the real woman riding ahead of me through the cal sign, and the picture began, slowly, to look like what it was, which was a picture. The trouble came on the 5th day, and trouble out there always comes from the sky. We dropped into the worst of it, the salt draw, a long dead trench of a thing where nothing grew and the white ground ran for miles, when Cass pulled up sharp and sat looking south. I'd learned by then to look where she looked. There was a brown smudge low on the world, no bigger than a thumbprint, and it was the most peaceful-looking thing. "That's a wall," she said. "Dust. It'll be on us in an hour and it'll blow till dark. We can't outrun it and we can't sit in the open in it. The horses'll turn their backs and drift and we'll lose them, and on foot in the cal sign you're dead by Tuesday." She wheeled her horse. "There's a cut bank, 1.5 miles back east. Move." We moved. We made the cut bank, a sheltered elbow of a wash with a clay wall to break the wind, just as the light went the color of weak tea and the first grit started stinging. And then Cass Wren did 3 hours of work in about 40 minutes that I have not forgotten and do not expect to. She had to strip the loads and stack them. She had the 6 horses ringed close in the lee of the bank with their tails to the wind, hobbled and tied nose to nose in pairs so they'd settle each other, and she went down the line talking to every one of them low and steady, while the storm came down on us like the lid coming off the world. I have been in dust storms. I had never been in one out there in the open dry with no roof and no walls and 300 miles of nothing. It is a brown roaring dark at noon. You cannot see your own horse's head. You cannot breathe but through cloth, and even then the grit grinds in your teeth. And the whole time, with my back to the clay wall and my bandana soaked and pressed to my face, I could hear her, couldn't see her. The storm had taken the world, but I could hear her voice going steady down the line of horses. The same low talk, never rising, never scared. And I understood that the only thing standing between me and a long, ugly death in the salt draw was that voice, and the woman it belonged to, and her word that she'd shook on. When it broke near dark, we were both buried to the shins in fine sand, the whole camp half drifted over and not one horse lost. Not one. She came and dropped down beside me against the clay wall finally and pulled her bandana off, and her face under it was clean where the cloth had been and filthy everywhere else, and she was shaking, just barely, just in the hands, the way the bravest people shake after, when there's no more use for being brave. I had thought she was made of the same hardpan as the country. She was not. She was just a person, doing a near impossible thing alone because she'd given her word and scared underneath it like anybody. "You saved every one of them," I said. "I save horses," she said. "It's the one useful thing I do." And then Lo, looking out at the settling dark, not at me. "My father went out in one of these, 10 years back, storm like this, lighter even. He thought he could make the tank and beat it. They found him and the string a week on. Horses had drifted 4 ways. He'd cut his own coat into strips trying to tie him close, and his hands," she stopped, "started over flatter. After that I learned weather. I learned it the way some women learn the Bible. I will not lose a horse to the sky, not one, not ever again." I did not say anything stupid then, thank God. I had run out of stupid somewhere back in the storm. I just sat with her against the clay wall in the new dark while the horses settled and blew, and after a while I took my canteen, the one with the good water she'd been hoarding for an emergency, and I uncorked it and handed it to her, and she looked at it and looked at me, and understood that I was telling her this counted as an emergency, that she counted, and she drank, and handed it back, and we sat. That was all. But I have sat closer to people in 20 years of marriage, and felt farther from them than I felt from Cass Wren in that wash with the dust still hanging in the air. I should have known then. I expect I did know then, and just hadn't the nerve to call it by its name, on account of I was a betrothed man. We came up out of the calcine on the 8th day onto better ground, grass and a real running creek, and the change in the world ran straight through both of us. We'd been holding ourselves tight against the dry for a week. Now things loosened. We talked. Or she talked, once she got going, dry and funny, about the green colts and the old man and the buyers who'd come up the notch road and balk at dealing with a woman until they saw her ride, and then balk worse. I told her about the 2-bar, the mesquite reach, the good grass. I told her about Sarah. I had not told anybody about Sarah in 3 years, not the way I told it that night by the creek, not the brand flat version but the true one, the laugh she'd had, and the way the house had gone quiet and the chair I still couldn't make myself push in. Cass listened the way she did everything, without flinching, and when I was done she didn't bring a pie or a pity. She said, "She sounds like she was worth the cost of missing her. Most aren't. You're lucky, even sad as you are. A lot of men bury a wife they were only ever boarding with." And I thought of Miss Lavinia Prout, whom I had arranged precisely, so I would never again have anyone worth the cost of missing, and I felt the whole foolish architecture of my sensible January plan go quiet and cold inside me, like a lamp turned down. "What about you?" I said. "Nobody ever come up that road for you instead of the horses?" "The fire came once or twice, so I'd never leave the notch, or that I'd want it kept in my name, or that I broke horses better than they did and couldn't stomach it. The marrying kind they call me down in town, not the marrying kind. What they mean is not the kind to fold up small and fit in a man's pocket." She shrugged, easy, but I'd learned by then to hear under her easy. "I made my peace with it. I've got my horses and my hills. It's a clean life. I don't owe anybody an account of it." "No," I said, "you don't." We looked at each other across the fire. There was a thing in the air then that both of us were too sensible and too cowardly to touch, and so we let it sit and went to sleep, and in the morning we rode the last 2 days into Calder, where my bride was waiting, and neither of us said one word about it. Calder was a railroad town, raw and new, all fresh-cut lumber and the smell of coal smoke, and after the calcine it hit me like a fairgrounds. I left Cass with the horses at the livery and went to the hotel to meet Miss Lavinia Prout, and I will tell you, I went up those steps feeling like a man going to his own hanging, which is no way to feel about a wedding, and I knew it, and I climbed them anyway because I had shook on it too. A man's word out east in a letter is the same as a man's word out west in a wash. I'd told this woman I'd marry her. She'd crossed half a country on the strength of it. Miss Lavinia Prout was exactly her photograph. That was the first surprise, that nothing was a surprise. She was calm and correct and lovely in the still, arranged way, and she rose to meet me in the hotel parlor in a gray traveling dress without one speck of dust on it, and she gave me her hand and we sat, and we were, both of us, instantly and completely miserable. It is a strange thing to watch two reasonable people be polite at each other across a parlor while the truth gets louder and louder under the talk. She asked after my journey. I said it had been hard country. She said she did not care for hard country. She'd found even Calder rather more rough than she'd been led to expect. I said the 2-bar was a working ranch, 140 miles from the nearest town, that the town was Hollow Spring and it was smaller than Calder. I watched her face. She was too well-mannered to let it fall, but I have spent my life reading stock and weather, and I could read a woman realizing she had made a serious mistake. "Miss Prout," I said finally, because somebody had to be the one, and I'd had a week of Cass Wren teaching me that the kind thing and the hard thing are most often the same thing. "Let me speak plain, and you tell me if I've got it wrong. You don't want this, and I don't believe I do either, and we've each been too honorable to say it." Something went out of her shoulders, relief plain as water. "Mr. Marsh," she said, I came west because my prospects at home had narrowed. A widower with means and his own land, it seemed sensible. She said the word and I near laughed out loud because it was my own word, my own January word, and here it was come 300 miles to sit in this parlor and be confessed by a stranger. I am not suited to 140 miles from a town. I would wither and I'd make you wither watching me do it. And there is, she colored, the first honest color in her. There is a gentleman, the freight agent here in Calder, who has been very attentive since I stepped off the train 4 days ago, and who has asked me to consider remaining in Calder, where there are streets and a church and other ladies. She lifted her chin, braced for me to be a brute about it. I was not a brute about it. I stood up and I took her hand again and I thanked her honestly for her honesty, and I told her I hoped the freight agent knew his luck, and I meant it. We had been engaged for the better part of a year by post, and we ended the whole thing in under 10 minutes in a hotel parlor, both of us lighter for it. Two sensible people who'd built sensible plans on top of the place where a heart's supposed to go, and found out, too late and just in time, that the place doesn't stay empty just because you tell it to. I walked out of that hotel into the Calder Street feeling like a man let out of a long sentence. And the very first thing I saw, down at the livery in the late gold light, was Cass Wren, leaning on the corral rail watching my 6 horses water, with her braid down her back and her hat pushed up, and I will tell you what I felt looking at her. Because it is the whole point of the thing, and I've taken long enough getting to it. I felt found. I had ridden 300 miles toward a stranger to keep from feeling exactly that, and it had run me down any way out in the salt draw, in a dust storm, in a dry wash with a shared canteen, and it had been waiting all along, not at the end of the trail but on it. The woman I should have seen had been holding the lead rope the whole way. I went down to the livery with my heart going like a green colt's, and here is where I near ruined it, and where Cass Wren proved one more time she had more sense in her dusty boots than I had in my whole sensible head. "It's off," I said, fool that I was, striding up. "Prute, it's done. She's staying in Calder, there's a freight agent, it's all settled, no hard feelings on either side." I was grinning like an idiot. Cass, I've been a blind man, the whole way out here, you and I." She didn't turn around right away. When she did, her face was the hardpan face again, shut down, the one she'd worn that first morning in the breaking corral, and it stopped me cold. "So she turned you loose," Cass said slow, "and now you've looked around and found the next nearest woman who happens to be standing in a horse lot, and you've decided that'll do. She let that land. I'm not a thing you settle for because the one you sent away didn't suit, Marsh. I'm not the spare horse. You want to know why they call me not the marrying kind? Because I won't be somebody's reasonable second thought. I had enough of being the practical choice from buyers who take the horse and humor the woman. I'd sooner have my hills." It went through me like the cold water at 12 Mile. Because she was right, and I'd done exactly the thing she said, come barreling down to that corral the same as I'd ordered her, like a windmill out of a catalog, convenient, available, there. I had near taken the truest thing in my life and made it sound like a leftover. So I shut my mouth. I took a breath, and I tried again, the way she'd taught me without ever meaning to, the hard plain way that is the only kind that's any good. "You're right," I said. "I said it backward and I said it cheap, and you ought to send me up the road. So let me say it forward." The horses blew in the gold light. The whole raw town went on around us and I didn't hear any of it. I didn't look around the corral and pick the nearest woman. I sent Lavinia Prute off easy and glad because somewhere out in that storm, holding a canteen, I'd already gone and given the thing to you, and I was too much a coward to know it till I saw you standing here. You are not a second thought, Cass Wren. You are the only thought I've had worth the having in 3 years. I came out here to marry a woman so I'd never feel anything again. And you went and made me feel everything anyway and saved my life twice while you were at it. And I am asking you, not telling, asking whether you'd have a blind, snoring, sensible cattleman who's just now learned to see." She looked at me a long while. The hardpan face didn't crack all at once. It went the way the calcine goes when the rain finally comes, slow, in pieces, the cracks letting the wet in. "I keep the notch," she said. "In my name. I don't fold up and I don't move to your 2-bar and quit my horses to keep your house. I'll not be boarded with." "Then we run 2 outfits," I said. "Yours and mine. Mesquite grass for the cattle, tallow hills for the horses, and 140 miles of road between that I'll ride twice a week till I die if that's what it takes, because I have just spent 8 days learning there's not a thing in this country I'd rather look at than you on a horse. Equal. Your name on your half, mine on mine, and the middle ours. I shook on a wedding once already this trip and got let out of it. I'd like to shake on this one and never want out." And Cass Wren, who would not be owned, would not be settled for, would not fold up small enough to fit in a man's pocket, put out her hard, dry hand across the corral rail, and squeezed once, testing whether mine would hold, and found that it would. "Well," she said, and there it was at last, the whole smile, and it changed her face into something I'd ride 300 more miles of dry to see. "It's high country and a hard life and you snore like a sick bull, but I reckon you'll do, Marsh. I reckon you'll do fine." We were married in Calder by the same parson who, an hour earlier, had married Miss Lavinia Prout to her freight agent, and Lavinia stood up for Cass, the two of them laughing about it in the vestry like old friends, both of them saved at the last from the sensible mistake, both gone glad in opposite directions. Then Cass and I turned the horses around and rode back across the Calcine, 300 miles, the long way home, in no hurry at all this time, side by side. That was 22 years ago. The notch is still in her name. It always will be. We never did pull the 2 outfits into one. She breaks the finest horses in 4 counties and I run the cattle, and there's a road between us that I have ridden so many thousand times my chestnut could walk it blind. And every single time I come up that road and see her in the breaking corral with a green colt on a long line talking low, the country not crowding her 1 inch, I feel the same thing I felt in the gold light at Calder. Found. I rode 300 miles to marry a stranger so I would never have to feel a thing again. I'm the most fortunate fool the Calcine ever spat back out. The plan was sensible. The plan was wrong. And the truest thing I know after all of it is that the heart you've sworn off and locked up tight does not stay empty just because you've ordered it to. It only waits, quiet as that dry white country, for somebody with the grit to cross over and find the water that was there the whole time. Her name is Cass. She held the lead rope the whole way. I'd just forgotten to look at who was on the other end of it.